In this video, we're going to be building this onboarding automation from scratch where you can just steal and implement straight into your agency. Within this onboarding automation that we're going to be building today, it's going to automatically create different Slack channels for the user, invite relevant team members, and send a welcome message. We're also going to make it create different folders which are preloaded with resources. Then it's going to go ahead and update the CRM, create a project within your project management system, which is already assigned to specific employees, and preload different tasks for those employees, as well as send 2 different sets of emails to the client depending on the different employee that's actually been assigned to them. We're going to be building this whole thing from scratch. Whilst this is just a small part in a much larger onboarding process, if you're looking for an easy way to get started with automation, then just follow along, because I'm going to make this very beginner friendly and show you exactly how to build this automation from scratch. So we might as well get straight into it. The first step of any automation is the trigger, and in this example there's a bunch of different triggers depending on how you actually structure your onboarding process. So for example, it could be an update in your CRM, it could be a Slack message to a specific channel, it can be a contract being signed, it can even be a payment being received. In this example, we're going to use a basic trigger just because a lot of different people watching this will have different triggers like the ones I mentioned here. So you'd have to just implement your own trigger as a part of automation. So within make.com, I've gone ahead and created a new scenario. I'm going to go to tools and I'm going to choose basic trigger. Here I'm basically just preload information that you would get from an update, such as the lead's name, the company name, their email, their phone number, and the actual retainer value. Now I'm just going to fill this with some examples, and that's basically your trigger setup. Like I said, when you're actually doing this, you'd have to configure your own trigger, whether it's a payment, a contract, different things like that. But in this example, I'm just going to leave it as this. So I'm going to go press OK. Now we're going to start with the first action of this automation, which is creating a Slack channel. Now, obviously in this example, I'm using Slack, but it doesn't really matter. The whole premise of this is that we're basically creating some sort of space that we can actually talk to the client, which in this example is Slack. You can use whatever software you actually use to talk to your clients. So within the Slack module, I'm going to scroll down until I find create a channel, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually connect Slack. Now in this case, it's already connected, but if it wasn't, all you have to do is press add, press save again, and then it's going to go open up a window basically prompting you to actually sign up to your Slack, which in this instance, I'm already signed in. Once you've gone to actually sign up, you need to actually choose the name. And for that, we're going to be importing it from the variable of the company name. But if we leave it like this, it's not going to work. Slack is very annoying. The channel name has to be all be lowercase, and there can't be any spaces or anything like that, or else it won't work. So for this, I'm going to be using Make's formatting abilities. So firstly, I want to change this to lowercase. So if I go over here and I choose lower, and then here I just want to enter the company name, as you can see here. So I go back to the little star and enter the company name. But this is enough, because if there's any gaps, it's still not going to work. So I'm going to go back to the front, and then I'm going to choose another tool, which is replace. Here it gives you a small indication of how it works. In this case, you just want to replace any spaces. So I'm just going to copy and paste this lower section right here, and I'm going to delete it and just paste it within the replace function. And then all I want to replace the space, but I'm not going to put a space or else it's not going to work. I'm going to go over to the keywords and enter space. And then rather than a space, I want it to be a dash. That's the way Slack basically likes it, just like that. So now, for example, if I had something that says company name, it wouldn't say company name. It will be company dash name, which is how Slack wants it. You can keep it private or public. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as public. So I'm going to go press OK. And I'm going to run this module with an example name. So I can get Marketing Inc., for example. Press OK, and you can see now it's going to go ahead and actually create a Slack channel. And if I go ahead and actually open my Slack, you can see that Marketing Inc. channel has been created. Now that we've actually created a channel, the next thing I want to do is actually invite my team members to that channel. Now, in this case, I'm going to invite my customer success manager, Selena, but if you are doing this, you can invite any relevant team member to that specific project. Another thing you could do here is add a router. So by going over to flow control, scrolling down to router, and just connect it to this stage. And here you can basically add different team members depending on specific services. So let's say from the trigger, you had another field which was services. You could then set up filters within here just by selecting that field and then entering different operations such as contains, does not contain. So you can kind of filter it and add different relevant team members depending on actual specific services you're offering. So for example, if you're offering SEO and Facebook ads as 2 separate things, and 2 separate services will require 2 different team members. If someone comes in on the service side of things doing the SEO, you can add the SEO relevant team members. But if someone comes in on the Facebook side of things, you can add in the Facebook relevant team members just by using this router. In this example, we don't need this, but if you did want to do it, here's an option. I'm just going to add another module, and this time it's going to be Slack again. And if I scroll all the way down until I see invite users, this is where we're actually going to be inviting a user. Now, the key thing we need to do here is within the actual channel, we're going to map it, and we're going to enter that channel ID from the previous step just by selecting it just like that. Now, this is blurred out for you guys, but I'm just going to go ahead and select my team member, which in this case is Selena, just like that. So I'm going to go press OK. And if I go ahead and copy the Slack ID and just run this module only and copy and paste the Slack ID from the previous step, it's gone ahead and invited the actual user. So now if I go back to Slack and open that exact same channel, you can see Selena's actually been invited to join the channel. Obviously, in this example, I'm using one team member. If you had different team members you wanted to add, you can also do multiple team members. And once that's all done, I actually want to send a welcome message. Now, I will say, if you do have an enterprise account for Slack, you can also configure the API, which is basically just how different software communicate each other, to automatically invite your client as a guest. In this example, I don't have access to the API, which most of you won't, to be honest. So I'm just going to leave it as that. The best way I can actually do this is just create a task in your project management system to actually invite them to Slack. But for now, we're still going to send them an invite message, because regardless of when they join, this is going to be the first message they actually see in a channel. So this is going to be kind of a welcome message. So I'm going to go over to Slack, and then I'm going to scroll down to create a message. Now, the key thing I need to enter here is the channel ID, which once again, I get from the previous step. And here we see two different options. We see text and we see blocks. Now, when sending a message through Slack, specifically through make.com, I always recommend going with blocks rather than text, because you can format it a bit more. Now, the key difference here is that with blocks, you have to do a bit of extra work, but trust me, it's worth it in the long end, and it's not that hard at all. So rather than putting a random text here, I'm going to go over and create a block. To do this, we basically need to enter this code. Now, don't be scared at all. Slack already does all of this for you. All you have to do is go over to the block kit builder, and then you can go ahead and select a template, make your own. And the possibilities what you can do here are really much less limited than what you could do with just simply text. So here you can format different things. You can add buttons, you can add images, different things like that. This is an example here. As you can see, it's very, very easy to edit this just by deleting it, or you can add different things such as an image, a date picker. I mean, there's a lot you can actually do here. You also have templates if you go over here, and you can choose a relevant template. Once you kind of selected your ideal message you want to send, all you have to do is go over here to the top right hand side and just copy the payload. And then if you go back to make.com, all you have to do is just copy and paste that inside the blocks. In this example, I'm going to be sending this message right here. And the way to actually format it in that way is just by using this specific code, which, by the way, if you want access to any of the resources I'm talking about in this video, you can check out the first link in the description to join our free community. There we have all the different resources from every single YouTube video we've ever created. So if you want access to this code or even the automation template that you can import straight into your account, check that out in the description. Now within make.com, I'm just going to copy and paste that block. And there's a couple of things I want to change. Firstly, I want to actually change the name from David to the actual lead's name just by deleting David and scrolling down and enter the name just like that. And then if you scroll down, I think that's the only thing I want to change. So I'm just going to leave it as that. Perfect. Now I am going to turn on advanced settings, because if I didn't, it would show up as Integromat, which doesn't look as nice. So here I can actually choose the emoji. So I'm going to put wave in this example. And then for the username, it's going to be onboarding bot. Perfect. So if I go ahead, press OK, and I just run this again just by copy and paste that Slack channel first and running the module. And here I'm just going to enter the name, and the name, which let's say this example is Leo, myself. I'm going to go press OK, and it looks like the code is invalid. Let me just see. I might have copy and pasted it the wrong way. So I believe I'm missing something at the end. I know I've done. I'm missing a little bracket right here. So now if you run this again, it should work. Run this module, press the channel ID, which in this example is just this one right here. And then for the name, I go ahead and put Leo. Now we should automatically get that welcome message. Perfect. So now if I go back to check this on Slack, you can see we have that nice message from the onboarding bot, basically welcoming the lead based on their name. Now, this message should be a welcome message, but if you're doing this properly and you're kind of writing the correct copy, it should basically inform the lead specifically on what this channel is for and different things like that. I think this is important, not just within the onboarding process, but throughout the rest of kind of your relationship with the client. So I actually want to pin this message. To do that, I'm going to go back to make.com, and I'm going to have another module within Slack again, just to pin the message. So I'm going to go over to Slack, and if I scroll down to messages, you can actually see we have that option to pin a message right here. So all we need from here is obviously collect your Slack account again, enter that channel ID, which we're going to get from the previous step, and then we're going to enter the timestamp, which once again we get from the previous step right there. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And if I just copy the timestamp and the actual channel ID in one go, make my life a bit easier, and I run this module to actually test it, and I press OK. You can see now that message is pinned. So now if we go back to check that in Slack, you can see that message now automatically been pinned for everyone in the channel. Cool. That's pretty much all I want to do for Slack. Now it's time to move on to the other side of things, which will be happening within Google Drive. Now here I'm going to be doing two very, very simple things. I'm firstly going to create a folder under the client's name within my client folders. Within that folder, I'm then going to go ahead and create another folder, which is actually shared. And within that shared folder, I want to go ahead and actually preload a resource for the client. In this example, is going to be a random Google Sheet, but in your example, you can repeat this and preload any sort of sheets, templates, or any resources that you need your clients to actually complete. So let's go ahead and actually do this. I'm going to add another module, and in this example, I'm going to go Google Drive. The first action I want to do is actually create a folder. So I'm going to go over to create a folder, and then you're going to go ahead and connect your Google account. Now, for Make.com, the easiest way to do this is with an app official domain. So, for example, in my case, I use leo@fluxomate.com rather than fluxomate@gmail.com. This is much easier, especially within Make.com. There is a way to use the @gmail.com accounts, but it is quite complicated. So I always suggest to go with kind of the branded ones. Once you actually go ahead and connect your account, you want to first choose where you actually want to deploy that folder. In this example, it's just going to be my client folders right there. And that's pretty much it. For the new folder name, I want to make sure to include that company name. So I'm going to go back to our trigger, choose the company name, and then enter client folder. Now this folder, the one shared, so I'm going to leave it as no, and then I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Now if I actually run this and then enter a random company name, we'll go for Marketing Inc. again, you'll see it's actually gone ahead and created that folder. So now if I go to my Google Drive, and I open up that client folder we actually selected, you'll see we have that Marketing Inc. client folder which you just created right now. If I go ahead and open up, at the moment there's nothing, but now we're going to go ahead and have another folder within this main folder we just created, and actually should be able to share this to the client with the relevant resources. So back in Make.com, let's go ahead and have another module. This is going to be Google Drive again, and then it's going to be the exact same action. We're going to create a folder. The only difference here is now here folder location, rather than selecting, we're going to go map, and then here we want to enter the folder ID from the previous step. And then for the new folder's name, I'm still going to include that company name. At the end, I'm just going to add shared folder. And in this example, rather than leaving it as no, I'm going to click yes, and then I'll make it available to anyone reader. You can also make it available to specific emails. So rather than go in anyone, you go over to user and then add that user's email. But in this example, just to make life a bit easier, I'm just going to keep it as anyone. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And now if I just copy that file ID or the folder ID, sorry, and I just run this module by copy and pasting the folder ID and adding Marketing Inc. If you go back to the Google Chrome tab, we should now see a folder within there, which as you can see, we do. And this is also shared. So if I go over to share this, you can see it's already set to anyone with link can actually view. Perfect. The last thing I want to do within Google Drive is preload a specific resource within this kind of client folder. Obviously, this is going to be a random Google Sheet, but in your case, you can load any specific resources that are relevant to your service delivery. So within Make.com, I'm going to add our last Google Drive folder, or module, I should say, sorry. And if we scroll down, all I want to do is just copy a file. Now for the original file ID, in this example, I'm going to be copying this lead magnet calculator from a previous sheet. In order to get the specific ID, all I have to do is kind of find this code in the URL that's between the edit function and the just after the D. So I'm going to copy and paste that within our actual original file ID. And then for the new folder location, I'm going to enter that folder ID location that we just created a second ago. And the only thing I want to change for the copy name is adding that company name of the actual client within the file. So if I scroll all the way back down to the trigger, and here I'm going to add lead magnet calculator or whatever name of the resource you actually want to add. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And if we just copy that file ID or the folder ID, sorry, and we just run this module again, enter that folder ID and we'll put Marketing Inc. Now it should automatically duplicate that file within the Google Drive folder, making it very easy for the client to automatically access it. Now if you go back to Google Drive, you can see we have that sheet that's already been imported in and it's ready to actually share within that folder that we just created. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for the Google Drive side of things. Now let's move on to actually updating the CRM. All I want to do here is just search for that lead from the email and then update the contact card within my CRM. In this example, I'm using this CRM, which I built in a previous video, which you can check out right here. But all we're going to do is basically getting one of these leads, searching for them by the email, which in this example is going to be Fluxomate, and just updating it to the close stage. Now, if you're using your CRM as a trigger, then you can ignore this step. But for everyone else that's using the payments and the contracts, I thought I'd add this in just in case it might be valuable to you. So for this, I'm going to add another module. And in this example, I'm going to be using NoLoco, which is basically the app I actually use to build my internal platform or my custom sales pipeline. In that previous video I mentioned earlier, once again, you can use whatever CRM or pipeline kind of software you're using. Make.com integrates with over 5,000 different applications, so I'm sure yours will be there. And you can follow a very similar process. So the first thing I want to do is actually search for the record just to make sure it actually exists. And the main reason we're actually searching for that record is so we can collect that ID. So for the collection, I'm going to go scroll down and go over to contacts. And as you can see, right now it's going to request me for the ID, which I don't have. So instead, I'm just going to search for it by the email, and then I'm going to use that ID in my later steps. So the email, we're going to scroll all the way down to the email right here. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Now, Alternatively, you could also add a router, kind of like I mentioned earlier, by going over to flow control and then just select a router and then selecting two different options. So for example, one option if the email exists, which will just update the card, and another option if the email does not exist, which basically means there's no lead within your CRM, to create a new record within your CRM. Once again, I'm not going to be doing this example, but the option is there if you can, just by adding a router and then setting the different filters for the router. But in this case, I'm just going to be adding another step. Before I actually move on to the update step, let me just run a test on this. And I'll enter leo@fluxomate.com, press OK, and that should go automatically and find a specific record, which as you can see, it does. This is the record we're actually going to be updating. So here I'm going to add another step. I'm going to choose the logo again, and in this instant, I'm going to choose update a record. Now that we actually have the ID, when we actually choose the collection, which is in contacts, we can actually enter that record ID from a previous step just by entering this right here. So now we're actually able to update the record. Now here there's a ton of different things we want to update. The main thing we want to do is move the client stages from lead to active client, the sales stage to closed. The company name we're going to leave, and everything else we're going to leave apart from when it turn qualified as yes. Boom. So I'm just going to go ahead and press OK. And now if I copy this ID right here and I actually run this, we should see that task automatically update, which it does. If I go back to my CRM, you can see Leo is no longer here. And if I go over to the sales overview, this specific lead has automatically been moved over to closed and is automatically been marked as qualified. Now we've dealt with the CRM side of things, I want to go ahead and create a project within my project management software. Now for this, I'm also going to be using an operating system I built in a previous video, which allows me to actually track different projects and assign it to different employees. And this is once again hosted on NoLoco, but once again, if you're using a different project manager tool, feel free to use that as well. I'm just going to add another module, and it's going to be NoLoco again. And in this instant, I'm just going to create a record because I know a project doesn't already exist. So for collection, I'm going to scroll down and actually choose the project collection. And here is where I'm going to be adding all that information from that trigger. So the project name, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the company name and then just add project. For the start date, I'm going to put in today's date just by going over to this date section right here and entering now. The retainer, I'm going to enter that retainer from the trigger. Once again, I'm scrolling all the way down and just selecting the retainer. The status of the project is going to be onboarding. And then for the email, I'm going to enter that leads email. Once again, straight from the trigger by scrolling all the way down and selecting the email. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and select the Slack channel ID, which I'll get from one of the previous steps when we actually created that Slack channel just by choosing it just there. Last thing I want to do here is two different things. We're going to be adding linked records. Linked records are basically how two different databases are going to communicate with each other. What this basically means is we're going to be linking that client to the project, and we'll also be adding the different employees to the project. So the first thing we'll do is add different employees. Now, like I said earlier, you could automatically route this and add specific employees depending on the service offering. But in this example, I'm just going to choose some random employees. So if I go over to the employee collection, I'm going to go ahead and assign employee 4 to this project, or 5 in this example. And that's pretty much it. And then the last thing I want to do is actually assign a client. Here, all I have to do is add an item. And then for that collection ID, we can get that client collection, which we updated a second ago just by going over and selecting the ID. Perfect. So now this project is automatically going to be created. If I go ahead and press OK, and then I run this module, you're going to enter the different information and the ID, which is 19. We're going to go ahead and press OK. And now it's going to automatically go ahead and create a project, which if I go back to my project management tool and I go to projects, we should see that marketing in project being loaded right here. You can see the start date is set to today, and we automatically have the employee 4 assigned. Now, the cool thing is if we go over to the database side of things and we find that specific project, we should also see the client is automatically assigned, which as you can see, it already is. Perfect. So far I'm very happy with this, but I do want to add some more things. And the last thing I want to do within this kind of project management side of things is I want to automatically create a task for that specific employee so he can kind of log in this task management system and begin working on a client. So for this, I'm going to add another module, which is once again within NoLoco. Once again, you can use whatever task management or project management software you actually use them. And I'm going to go ahead and create another record. Within that record, for the collection this time, it's going to be a task collection. And here's where I'm going to be adding all the different information about that specific task. In this example, I'm going to be naming it. Is the task going to be asking them to basically start the channel audit for this specific customer? I'm going to leave the start date empty, but for the due date, I'm going to set this due in an hour or in 1 day, sorry. So for that, I'm going to go over to the date side of things. I'm going to put add days, and then I'm just going to enter now here and then add 1. This is basically going to add 1 day addition to the due date, which basically means I'm making it due in 1 day. For the task notes, I'm going to say it as prepare for the audit for the channel. And for the relevant links, I can add something such as auditresource.com. Obviously, you can add whatever kind of specific resources that may help your employee at this point. The status of this is going to be in backlog, and for the task type is going to be a customer success task. The last thing I want to do is actually assign a project and an employee. So for the project, if I go ahead and add an item, I can select that ID from the project we just created a second ago just by choosing this. And then if we scroll down to the employees, we can go ahead and select the employee we just selected a second ago just by going over to the assign employee collection, open up Edge, open up the node, and enter that specific ID. Perfect. So if I go ahead and press OK, and if we run this module just to test it, entering the specific ID, which was 18, I believe, and this one was 5, hopefully, I can go ahead and test that, and that's going ahead and create a task. So now if I go back to my project management system, I go to my application, I go to task, you can see we have that task right here, which is prepare YouTube channel audit. And if we scroll down, the assigned employee is employee 4, and it's got that assigned project right there. Super, super happy with this. You also notice the due date is set 1 day from today, and the task type is automatically set to customer success. Now you could obviously just rinse and repeat this, which however many tasks you actually wanted, just by pressing clone and then changing the specific information about the task and the due date, different things like that. For now, I'm just going to leave this as that. The last thing I want to do within this whole process is just send 2 different emails. Now, you don't obviously have to send 2 different emails, just an example, but I'm going to be sending one generic email and then I'm going to be sending one customized email based on a specific employee. And I'll show you what this means in a second. So for this, I'm just going to add another module, and this time is going to be email. You can collect different things like Outlook, Gmail, whichever one you want, but in this case, I'm just going to use email. If I scroll down, I can go over and send an email. Now, if you're not too comfortable with automation, you could initially do this as a draft and then send it manually. But in order to avoid any delays in the onboarding process, I'm going to be directly sending that email. First thing I need to configure within the email is who I'm actually sending it to. So for here, I'm going to add the email address from that trigger, which is all the way down here, just so I'm selecting that email. Now we can actually move on to kind of structuring our email. Now, this isn't a copywriting masterclass. Obviously, don't actually copy this. I'm just here to go show an example. So I'm just going to go ahead and name this Welcome Aboard. The content type is going to be HTML, but don't be worried about that. I'm going to show you how to actually convert this. Now, when sending any email through automation, it's always better to convert to HTML because the format will look a lot better. If you don't and just leave it as text, then it kind of is very, very unformatted and doesn't really look appealing to the client. So this is why I always convert my emails to HTML. In this case, this is the HTML I'm going to be using in this example. Now, once again, don't be scared by this. ChatGPT made all of this for me, and I'll show you how to actually do that. If you head over to ChatGPT, all you want to basically ask it to is convert this email to HTML for me, and then just enter the email, and as you can see, it'll automatically give you the code, which you can just copy just by pressing this copy code button, and then coming back to your make.com scenario and just adding it right there. Once again, nothing too complicated. The only thing I did change is adding the name of the client. So if I go over here and I scroll all the way down to the name, you can see now it's going to be slightly personalized. The second email is going to be a bit more personalized depending on the employee. So here we're just letting them know, welcome to the team, and that they should get a Slack invite soon, and also send them different actions they can complete, just a generic email. So we're going to go ahead and press OK, and that's that email basically done. Now, the next email I don't want to send straight away just to avoid overwhelming them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another module, and this one's going to be a sleep module, which basically means kind of a delay. So if I go over to sleep, and here I'm going to put a 120-minute delay, so 2-minute delay, just to give him time to kind of process that initial email. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK, and now I'm going to add another module. Now all I'm going to do here is send another email, so I'm going to open another email module, and then scroll down to actually send an email. And then what I'm going to do a very, very similar thing. I'm just going to enter the actual email address of the lead, just by scrolling all the way down here and entering that email. The subject in this case is just going to be what happens now. I'm going to leave the content type as HTML, and in similar fashion to what I did last time, I just asked ChatGPT to convert this email to HTML. I'm just going to copy this, go back to my make.com automation, and just paste it right in. Now, a couple of things I want to change here. You can have a read through this email, but I'm basically telling them who's going to be looking after them, and that specific person is going to be the employee that we assigned in a previous step. So for this, I'm going to change this from employee and actually include the name. So I'm going to go over to that project step we did a second ago where we created a new record. And if I go over to assign employees, I open this up, open up the node again, and I should be able to get the actual name of the employee, which in this case is employee 4. Obviously, in a real situation, it will be an actual name. So here we have that employee name. I also do want to include the actual email of the employee so they have a direct access to if you have any problems getting in Slack. And once again, in similar fashion, I'm going to open up that project step, open up their assigned employees, and then enter the email. And then I'm going to enter the name once again here, just by entering the name. Perfect. Now, in this example, it's quite a silly example. I'm just going to send an email, but if you have different employees which will automatically be assigned to different tasks, then it's a great way to kind of personalize that onboarding email and show your new client exactly who they'll be working with. So I think this is really, really powerful. We're going to go and press OK. And now it's time to run this automation from the start to make sure everything's working properly. We've individually tested it, so I won't think there'll be any issues, but let me just change some of these values so you get an idea this actually works. So for the name in this example, I'm going to be putting Vladimir. Company name is going to be, I don't know, automation experts. And then for the test email, I'm just going to choose another lead in my CRM to make my life a bit easier. So if I go over to the CRM side of things, so sales breakdown, and then go over to leads, there's no leads that are actually not closed, which is great for us. But let's say I'll go ahead and change any of these people. So this guy right here, I'll mark him as a booked call. So I'm just going to copy his email, which I should be able to find if it loads properly. So let's say we actually got this lead right here. So in this case, it's Evans Martinez. We're going to use this email, which is just an example email, guys. Go to edit, just copy this email. Cool. And you can see at the moment, they're marked as lost in a lost client stage, but this is all going to change. So I'm going to go over to back2make.com and just enter that specific email. So it's actually going to work. Perfect. So now I'm just going to go ahead and run this automation, just press and run once. And you see my hands is over there. Now it's going to go through the automation, create all of these additional steps. We're going to check on all the different things it's doing in a second to make sure everything's done properly. Now it is going to wait for 2 minutes. So while it's actually waiting, let's go over to Slack and make sure all these different initial steps are being completed. So I'm going to go over to Slack. And within this channels, you can see we have this channel being created called Automation Experts. And within that channel, we have the onboarding message, which is pinned with the actual lead's name and all different information they have to do. As you can see, one of the employees, which in this example is Selena, has also automatically been added to the channel. So we know that Slack side of things actually worked. Now, if we go over to the Google Drive side of things, just double check that's working in that sense. So if I go over to my client folders, we should see that Automation Experts folder being loaded in right here. And within that folder, we have a shared folder, which is a folder which I actually share with the clients. And if we open it up, we also have that automatic resource that we've imported for that specific client. So the Google Drive side of things has worked perfectly. Now, if I go over to the actual CRM, you can see firstly, this specific lead has been updated to active client and to the close stage. And if we scroll down, you can see they already have an assigned project, which is a good step. But if we go over to projects, we can see we have that project automatically being loaded with the project name, the retainer, the start date, and also the assigned employee, which in this case is employee 4. If we go over to our tasks, we should also have that new tasks, which as you can see is right here. And if I open it up, we have the start date, the task type, the notes on a specific task, and also the assigned project, which has been assigned to a specific employee, which is employee 4. So I couldn't be any happier with this. The emails are still loading painstakingly still, so I'm just going to stop this, but I'll add in screenshots of the actual emails to get an example. I just realized actually these emails won't work because I put a random email that doesn't really exist, but I would add screenshots of what these emails actually look like to give an idea of what it actually looks like in action. But guys, that's pretty much it. You've now stolen this onboarding automation from me and you have the exact tools so that you can replicate it within your own agency. Automated onboarding is one of the best things you can do. I always advise it to different agency owners who are looking to kind of get an introduction to automation and specifically implementing different automations within the different processes within their agencies. I can't stress enough how much it matters to make a good first impression of your clients. And if you do have delays with the onboarding process, then it's going to go ahead and kind of decrease the value that the customer is getting as soon as they sign up. Well, in this case, literally instantly, they're already getting a Slack channel, they're getting 2 different emails, they're getting an email letting them know that an employee is already working on their task. You already have everything within your project management system and your CRM. So everything is really, really starting to move along for this client. So hopefully you can kind of use different tools to allow your employees to get your clients better results. Like I said at the start of the video, if you want access to this automation template, any of the code, or any other resource that I've actually used in this video, you can use the first link in the description to actually join the Scale Proof Agency Hub. There we have every single resource from our YouTube videos, including the one that you just saw now. It's 100% free, and within there, we also offer access to, I think now we're just over 100 different established agency owners who are all looking to set up scale proof systems. You also get direct access to me. So if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, or you have any troubles setting up the code or different things like that, you have direct access to me and my team on there as well. If any of that sounded interesting, I'm sure I'll see you inside. But apart from that, guys, that's it from me today. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And like I said, this is a very, very small part of your onboarding process. Realistically, we're just doing a thing that should happen immediately as soon as you sign on, but there's so many more steps. So I suggest you actually continue learning by watching this video right here to give you an indication of the perfect onboarding process for a marketing agency. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. And that's it from me, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.